Good morning.
Recording in progress.
Welcome to the May 4th, 2023 Architectural Review Board meeting. I'm Chair Peter Balte. Could we have a roll call, please?
Yes, Chair Balte,
Present.
Vice Chair Rosenberg,
Present.
Board Member Chen, present, Board Member Hirsch,
Present.
and Board Member Thompson is absent. We have a quorum.
Oh, thank you very much. Do we have any members of the public who wish to address the board on any item not on our agenda today?
And no, we have no raised hands.
Thank you very much. Do we have any agenda changes, additions, or deletions, staff?
None at this time.
Okay, staff, do we have any city official reports?
One second. Let's see. Any projects? I don't think there were any new major architecture review projects submitted. I think, no, that was on last time. 640 Waverly, I think, was on last time. Preliminary architecture review. We had hoped to get it on at this next hearing, but due to the architect being out of town, it's been rescheduled for 6:15.
Okay, we do have a meeting next on May 18th. Is that correct?
We do.
And you have items on that agenda for us, or you will?
Yes, items on that agenda are intended to be 123 Sherman Avenue, coming back for a second formal for a recommendation. And then the SB9 objective standards was continued to a date certain.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. I'd like to then address our schedule of tentative future items. We've assigned an ad hoc committee to one of those items, and I'd like to hear back from that committee if they've had a chance to look at the plan set and see if they have any items they would like to point out to other members of the board as something worthy of taking a look at. Not to pass judgment or give an opinion on it, but have you looked at that project? And is there something that you would recommend the board look at regarding that project or staff? And I believe the project was it's a large housing project down in El Camino. Am I right on that?
There were three projects. One was 3150 El Camino.
That's right. That's the one I'm thinking about. And that we had board members Rosenberg and Hirsch as our subcommittee, our ad hoc committee. Do you have anything to report on that?
Well, we did look at the project together and we had some communications back and forth. We would recommend that the board takes a close look at interior issues of circulation when the project is brought forth, officially. And relative to the entry to the building, but also to the parking access to the building. And to the, you can't hear me, okay. And the delivery areas.
Wonderful, thank you for that report. What were the other buildings we had ad hoc committees on, please?
We also had 420 Acacia and the 800 San Antonio.
And did we have a subcommittee assigned to those projects?
Same subcommittee.
Same subcommittee. Does the subcommittee have anything to report on those two projects?
There is nothing major to report on those two items.
Wonderful, thank you very much. I'd like to then consider two upcoming items on our list of potential projects. One is at 3150 El Camino Real. I'm sorry, three altogether. The next one was at 4075 El Camino Way, and the last one was at 300 Lambert. I'd like to assign a subcommittee to each of these projects, just to have it on the record. And the first one, 3150, I guess we just reported on 3150. I'm sorry, I'm confused here. So the next one, 4075 El Camino Way. I would like to be on that ad hoc committee. And Yingxi, would you join me on that one?
Yeah, sure.
if staff, if you could just note the two of us on that, Ying-Chi and I will do our quick review and report back to staff or the committee as appropriate.
Thank
And
you.
that-
Yes.
The other project was 300 Lambert. I would like to assign board members Thompson in absentia and Ying-Chi again, board member Chen on that one, if that's okay.
Okay.
Okay, so just like to have that sort of those assignments out there for that. Okay, I have nothing else to add on this review of upcoming projects. Is there any other comments from any other board members? Not regarding the content of the projects, just trying to
None of this.
for help administratively.
Yeah, and Chair, if I may, just on 300 Lambert, that's only NSB 330 project at this point, so the plan set is going to be fairly slim.
That's perfectly fine. We understand that. Okay, with that, we'll move on to our first action item. Let me find my agenda here. So this is a public hearing regarding 3001 El Camino Real. It's a recommendation on applicant's request for approval of a major architectural review application allowing demolition of two existing retail buildings to construct a 129-unit, 100% affordable, 5-story multifamily residential rental development utilizing allowances and concessions provided in accordance with state density bonus regulations. Units would be deed restricted to serve tenants meeting 30 to 50% of area media income. The project would be located on a 49,864 square foot lot located at 31301 to 3017 El Camino Real. Do we have let's see, do we have any disclosures on that subject? Board Member Hirsch?
No, I didn't visit the project.
No disclosures.
Disclosure.
I visited the site again, but that's about it.
I'll disclose that I visited the site. Board Member Chen?
No disclosures.
No disclosures. Thank you.
Battery's not working.
Could we have a pause for a second, please? Board Member Hirsch, are we okay?
We're okay.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Okay, do we have a staff report on this project, please?
Good morning, Claire Raybold, Senior Planner. The project before you today is 3001 El Camino Real. And this is located in the North Ventura neighborhood near Page Mill and El Camino. And just for the benefit of the public, I know this is the third hearing before you, but I just wanted to give a quick overview again. The project includes demolition of 9,100 square feet of vacant retail and construction of a 5-story exclusively residential rental building with 129 units affordable to very low income, which is 30% to 50% of area median income for the tenants. This is a Senate Bill 330 project, meaning that they filed a pre-application in accordance with SB 330, freezing their development standards as of May of last year. And it's on a 1.14 acre parcel, 49,658 square feet. The project is proposing to use state density bonus allowances, which are specifically an allowance that is meant for low and very low income development near transit. They're eligible for unlimited density, a 33-foot increase in height from base zoning, and no parking, and 4 concessions. One that they're using for the rear setback on Acacia to provide a 5-foot setback for the balconies. The actual building is set back further, over 10 feet. The lot coverage, the gross floor area, and the open space requirements. So again, this is the third hearing before you, so I'm just going to go through some of the key comments that came up in the last motion. One of the key concerns was circulation overall. So the applicant has made some minor changes related to this, but has not made a lot of changes as requested by the ARB. There was interest in having internal circulation to the fitness center, the bicycle parking, the parking garage, and to have reduced length of connections to the trash collection and the laundry. The applicant has provided a on-site pathway to the fitness center, but still does not have an internal connection. The bike parking empties out into the courtyard. This is a redesign from what was originally proposed, which went out to El Camino. So we do think that that is an improvement, but it still doesn't have an internal connection to the bike parking. The trash collection, the applicant has revised their trash collection so that they have 2 rooms, one for the ground floor residential with bins and a main trash collection room, which will be the area that gets serviced. So the bins will be brought over by maintenance to the trash collection room. The room is still on one side of the building. They haven't provided 2 separate trash collection on each side of the building or a centralized collection. As I laid out in the staff report, there are some concerns with having a central trash collection room. Specifically, it needs to be serviced from the street and it needs to be 25 feet from that street. So providing it centrally located would be a concern from that perspective. The project would either need to be redesigned to have a 22-foot overhead where the garage truck could come in and service, or it would be servicing on El Camino, which we've expressed previously was a safety concern for delivery drivers, and we think would also be a safety concern for trash trucks. There was consideration of whether the trash collection should be on each side of the building, but it would need to take up real estate on the acacia frontage as well as the olive frontage, as well as each room above to provide the trash chutes. And the applicant has expressed that they had some concerns with doing that, and it took away from their ability to address other comments from the Architecture Review Board, such as having the community room on the exterior. They did ensure that it's building code compliant now. When it came last time, the way the distance between the stairs and the elevator wasn't sufficient. So there has been a redesign so that the project is building code compliant now. The applicant did add an entry door on Acacia, as well as a drop-off. They'll be providing a drop-off loading zone on Acacia as well. Again, this is to address the safety concerns raised by our Office of Transportation related to delivery truck drivers potentially double parking on El Camino, especially given the number of units. They had concerns that that could happen more frequently than would be and create a safety concern. There were a lot of comments about the El Camino facade and the color. The applicant has not made changes to provide more definition between the top, middle, and bottom. They do feel like they are providing a clear top, middle, and bottom to the building. Staff feels that there could be improvements made to this. However, the project is meeting all of the objective standards, and this is not an objective standard. More visibility on the street from El Camino Real facing uses. They did provide additional windows, especially into the art flex room that's between the fitness center and the bike room. And they haven't made changes to reconsider the vertical windows on the ground floor or break up the left side of the facade further. And they have not changed the white color. They have relocated the community room to face Acacia. Architecture Review Board was really interested in having a more kind of pedestrian friendly with views through room that faced out to the street frontage rather than the laundry room. So that revision has been made. And the applicant has not made changes to provide greater privacy and greater facade articulation at the rear ground floor units, or provided, they have provided ground floor unit plans, but they have not provided sections. I do want to briefly note a couple things going back to state regulations on what the Architecture Review Board's authority is and the city's authority, I suppose. So we do have the Housing Accountability Act. A local agency cannot disapprove a housing development project for very low income housing in a manner that renders the development project infeasible for development for the use of that type of housing. Unless they make certain findings. So we haven't met our RENA, so finding number 1 would not apply. The housing development project or emergency shelter as proposed would have a specific adverse impact upon the public health or safety. And there's no feasible way to satisfactorily mitigate or avoid the specific adverse impact without rendering the development unaffordable to low and moderate income households. So this is really the finding that we would have to make if the Architecture Review Board is interested in recommending denial of the project or looking to make changes to the project. Senate Bill 330, again, is the other state regulation that applies. And as I noted before, that pre-application freezes development standards. So the development standards for this project were frozen as of May of last year before the 1824 objective standards applied. So this project isn't subject to those newer objective standards. A mitigated negative declaration was circulated for review on February 13th of this year, and that review closed on March 15th. Formal responses to comments were included in attachment H of the staff report. The city received comments from the Santa Clara County Department of Environmental Health, Valley Transit Authority, and 1 member of the public and the board on the MND. So all of those formal responses are in your packet. And staff recommends that the Architecture Review Board take the following actions. Consider the mitigated negative declaration and mitigation monitoring and reporting plan, and recommend approval with conditions based on the findings and conditions of approval. And with that, I will turn it back to you and recommend you hear from the applicant.
Thank you very much, Planner Rabel. Do we have the applicant here to make a presentation?
Yes, we do. I will just share my screen and then I think Kathy's going to start.
Okay, if we could make, you have 10 minutes, and if you could please state and spell your name for the record. Start whenever you're ready.
Good morning. My name is Kathy Robinson. I am the Director of Development for Charities Housing. My name is Kathy, Kathy Robinson, Robinson. I'd like to start by thanking the staff for all their hard work in really assisting us through this process. Claire and her team have been great to work with, and I really think that we've come up with a wonderful design and development that will really be an asset to the community. I'd like to thank the ARB for your continued review and input. I really think that although Claire pretty well summarized the changes we made and the changes that we were not able to make, I really think that through your valuable input that the development has really improved over time as it's evolved. I think I'll just turn it over to Will now to kind of walk us through the individual changes that have been made. And then I'm available to answer questions as the discussion evolves. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Kathy. Yeah, I am Will Bloomer at David Baker Architects. That's WILLBLOOMER. And as Kathy mentioned, it's been really productive to work with the city and with the ARB. And so I want to give you guys a brief update of the improvements that we have made. So I'll just go through those now. And the way I want to do this is sort of showing what we had previously the last time we talked, and then just highlight some elements that have changed and how we've improved them. So last time we talked a lot about the locations of certain elements and the location of the community room, a little too disconnected. We talked about the connection through to Acacia. And so in this updated version, we've activated the El Camino Avenue frontage with our community room, which we think will be an incredible asset. We've also had the second lobby, as Claire mentioned, and that will be really good for mail or other services that come through. And thanks to working with the plan review with the ARB, we did relocate our stair 1. It's a little bit farther in, but we'll talk about how that improved everything in just a second. And so, yeah, on the upper floor, we talked about making sure that circulation is good for everyone involved. And so one thing that really came up is making sure that stairs were equitable and convenient for all to those elevators. So in this updated version, we've made sure that all of the stairs are less than 200 feet from the elevators. And on the upper floor, that was a similar comment. And so that's the only change that you'll see is just this relocation of stair 1. So I'm going to go to the previous massing and the differences that you'll see in the new version. Just highlight a couple of those. So we have set back this larger black mass slightly, and that's because of the stair relocation. We have a much improved street facade, and we have this community room to really activate that space along with the second lobby. And we also have more openness on that arts and crafts flex space along El Camino Real. And so those are the major the changes that we've made. And we're really proud of this building. We're really appreciative of the improvements that have been made in the comments from the ARB. And I think we're next going to go to Joe, who may be in the chambers, to talk a little bit about the circulation.
Good morning, Chair Balte and members of the board. Joe Head, Joehead. Charities has had the opportunity to revisit and reevaluate the traffic data from our environmental document. And there's a couple of things I want to point out for your consideration. First, the AM peak hour trips are 46 and the PM peak hour trips are 59. The trip distribution for our project is fairly even in that 25% are looking to go eastbound on Oregon Expressway toward 101, 20% west on Page Mill toward 280, 20% north on El Camino, and 25% south on El Camino. And that distribution covers 90% of the trips generated by our project. If one would assume that all the trips to Oregon Expressway exited our project on Olive, turned right, went to Ash, turned left, and went up to Oregon Expressway that way, so that entire distribution went in that direction, I think it's logical to conclude, though, that if you're going toward Page Mill or you're going north and south on El Camino, you would exit our project with a left turn onto Olive and then a right turn onto El Camino and proceed in the different directions. With that kind of a distribution schedule, you would have 16 trips in the AM that would utilize Olive in front of our neighbors. And you would have 20 trips in the evening that would utilize Olive in front of our neighbors. If that distribution is accurate, that's a trip in the morning about one every 3.7 minutes and a trip in the afternoon at about every 3 minutes. From our perspective and that of our traffic consultants, that is a minimal change to current conditions. Charities would remain open to adjustments in the North Ventura planning area for traffic flow so that some one-way activity might further protect our residents on Olive. The alternate to this would be to focus all of the incoming traffic and exiting traffic from our garage onto El Camino, with incoming traffic 100% from every direction except from the south on El Camino, needing to make the U-turn at Portage at the signal. A not unsafe but difficult process and a limiting one. It would also mean that if there was any emergency or infrastructure incident at the intersection of Acacia and El Camino, it would be very difficult, if not impossible, for vehicular traffic to enter or exit our site. For these reasons, we think that the impact on the Olive exit is minimal and within reasonable boundaries, and it provides flexibility for regular access and emergency access from a multitude of directions rather than the one direction that the Acacia alternative would require. Relative to parking, which is the second thing I want to talk about, Charities remains in the belief that we have provided for our demographic adequate parking in our garage. If that were to prove not the case, we would be more than willing to enter into a traffic district plan that would restrict our residents from parking in front of our neighbors' homes and make sure that our residents only park overnight, in the evenings, and on weekends, so that we would have the least impact. But again, we believe we have provided, in our experience and with the data, sufficient parking within our building. I've had the opportunity to present this same data and have an interaction with our neighbors so that they are aware of what our position will be today. And I thank you for your consideration. Kathy?
Thank you. Is that the conclusion of your presentation for your whole group?
I think Kathy might be wrapping up. If not, that was the conclusion.
I think that does conclude our comments so that we can leave plenty of time to answer any questions that you may have.
Wonderful. Thank you for the presentation. Staff, do we have any members of the public who would like to address the board?
Yes, we have one in-person speaker and one raised hands on
So
Zoom.
I'd like to open this meeting to comments from the public. If you could proceed with the first speaker, please.
Sure. First in-person comment, Eugen Lockhart, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. If you could state and spell your name for the record, please.
Sure. My name is Eugen Lockhart, Yugen Lockkhart, and I live at 405 Olive Avenue, and I'm representing quite a bit of the 400 block of Olive Avenue. A bunch of the neighbors and several are tenants of my parents. And I just wanted to say that obviously we're still frustrated with the impact of traffic and parking, et cetera, that not just Charities, but the surrounding other projects that are coming in are going to impose upon us. But that said, we've mentioned that before, and we'll proceed along that it's going to happen, and we're accepting that. So it is what it is. We did want to, I want to add that Joe Head and Charities has been interacting with us in-person meetings in our area, and it's been appreciated that they've been at least communicating. They've mentioned how they're going to operate the building, and if that's true, that does sound like that's going to be a good neighborly act that they're doing. They're trying to make sure that they're going to be part of the community. And they have talked about the parking just the other day with us about potential street parking permitting things, and we don't know what the best game plan is, but it sounds like they're open to communicate and talk with us, which is also appreciated. And also Claire did also reach out to us as well and talking about unrelated to charities, but just general traffic abatement ideas of maybe making Ash a one-way street or other. So we're still open to communicating that in the future. So I probably had other things, but that's what I'm remembering right now. So I appreciate all of your help and I appreciate the council giving input to charities and encourage you to keep going. I know you're regulated by California, which is quite insulting to you and us as a community, but you know, we're all doing what we can, and hopefully we'll just make this project work well. And also hopefully the Park Avenue townhouses will have a similar result of adding to our community, which is really what we want. It's less, we're not angry about higher density. We just don't want to be overwhelmed by higher density is really what our community is asking for. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Do we have another speaker?
Yes, second speaker, Rebecca Sanders on Zoom. You can unmute yourself.
Good morning. I want to align myself with many of the comments that you
Excuse me, good morning. Could you please state and spell your name for the record? Thank you.
Certainly. My name is Rebecca Sanders, REBECCA-SANDERS. I want to align myself with some of the comments that Eugen said. I think Eugen's being very, very nice and generous. I've been a resident of Ventura for over 20 years, and I think it's great that the staff has helped, and that Charities is so grateful to the staff for shepherding this project. I wish there was someone that could really advocate for the residents at City Hall. I think we could use more someone to kind of carry the ball for us. It's nice that Charities did have meetings with the residents, but I don't think they have made any adjustments based on feedback. And I see like a parking Armageddon before us, and I think that's a very serious consideration. I just don't think that having an RPP, I mean, who's going to park there? Their residents might not, but what about all the commercial parking? I mean, I think that the parking is a very serious situation up there. We have a lot of incursions of commercial parking in Ventura, and that corner is just very congested. So I really hope that you will ask them to, I think that really watch what they're doing with the parking and make the changes necessary to preserve, Acacia and Olive from becoming like San Francisco streets where, it's bumper to bumper, no one can park. It's not really safe. So that's a big concern I have. And also another concern I have, and of course I live in Central Ventura, so I am not really affected, but I just really feel for these residents down there. The project is using its full count for exemptions under SB 330, but that leaves the applicant still subject to rules like protect sight lines into neighboring properties, screening, planning, things like that. So I just want to put it out there that neighbors, all of us deserve some privacy, and while being good neighbors. And then just a final thing, collective impacts. The map of housing projects either being built or proposed in Ventura is up to 1,500 units. And so we can approve and, say, oh, great, one more great housing project that's going to serve the community. But the collective impacts in Ventura are just unreal vis-a-vis other neighborhoods. So I wanted to say I would like to share the love of housing with other neighborhoods and not put it all in Ventura. Thank you very much for hearing me today.
Thank you for your comments. Veronica, do we have anyone else?
No, that's all our public speakers.
Very well. We will now close the meeting to public comment, and I'll bring it back to the board for any questions we may have from either the applicant or staff. Does anyone have any questions?
I have a singular question for the applicant. What is your design decision that is adhering you to this very specific white color?
I'm not sure if we have a specific, or we think that that is a color that really works well, and we've done it. Like, what we're trying to do is use fiber cement in a way that gives it a lot of variation and other pieces. And so like, that's something that we are looking at, and we've had conversations with charities about. But I think it's not an objective standard change that we would be discussing at this point, but we're certain, like, we will continue to have this conversation internally as a team.
The reason that I ask is that we were pretty clear with some of our requests on the last meeting and the meeting before. This felt like some low hanging fruit for you guys to be able to accommodate. And yet the comment says, we appreciate this comment and have selected white based on aesthetics. As this is not a code issue, we will keep the white material as part of the design. That's pretty clear, just you guys saying we're going to do what we want. So the question is, why was this a sticking point?
Will, do you want me to chime in a little bit?
Yeah, I think you can give sort of your side of things if you want.
I guess my response would be that we think the aesthetic of the building is really attractive. It uses a variety of colors and textures and materials that play off of one another, and sometimes starting with sort of a blank canvas like white is really enhances the variety and the interest. And so I agree with Will. If, we can talk further about, is there a way to tweak the color slightly, but we really appreciate the aesthetic of the building that we've presented to you, and hope that you'll feel comfortable with that.
Can you remind me again of the specific name of the white that you guys have chosen and the LRV associated with it?
I need to check back on that specific value and number, but I think we'd start, I can get back to you with that information.
Be great. And I see Jody's got the materials board right here. Right, it just says CP1 fiber cement cladding color TBD. So getting that official white name and the LRV associated with it would be incredibly helpful.
Thank you, Kendra. Any other comments, questions? I mean, Ying-Chi?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. Kendra, are you done? Okay. First, I want to ask for the new art and craft space, is it open to public or it's just for the tenants of the building?
Right now, we have that sort of designated as flex space with a hope that it can become sort of an arts and crafts space that is actually open to the residents as well as the community.
Okay, and another question is, could you please confirm that the laundry room is much smaller compared to the previous design?
We relocated the laundry room as part of this community room. I think we've checked to make sure that we can have, like, previously there was a small lounge portion connected to the laundry room. We've made sure that we can fit the machines for either way, but the community room now serves as that lounge space, and both of these amenities have a wonderful view and or like views to the rear community yard, which we're really excited about. So we were able to remove that lounge as part of the laundry room, and that is the only reason why it would be any smaller.
So so based on your calculation, the number of the machines put in the room will still be the same? That
Yes.
meet the number of tenants for the entire building?
Yep.
Okay. For the drop off, the loading zone, so is there a designated loading zone along Acacia Avenue, or is just basically when you need it, you just block one lane of that street?
No, there now is a loading zone off of Acacia. And so that came from the comments, and we've looked into that, and it's in our civil drawings. And yeah, so that can serve for, we all know about deliveries, mail, all of these items. And so that's something that we really took to heart in our response, along with that new second lobby door.
Okay. I think we asked it last time, but could you please clarify the separation? Is there any separation between the public sidewalk and the private passage to the fitness center? Is there any separation, or you just use different pavings?
Yeah, it would just, there's no separation, or we like the idea that it's open, and that would be just, it's covered by the building above.
Mm-hmm.
And there's, so it's just an internal circulation. We'd probably work with landscape to understand exactly how to define that space, make it feel more of our own versus the public sidewalk. But they are just right next to each other.
Okay, so a couple of questions on the elevations. On the front, street front spaces like the fitness center and the flex space, will all those space be open to structure so that all your glazings will go up to the second floor, or there will be some kind of ceiling, and actually the glazing you're showing here maybe not accurately reflect the final design?
Well, I think what we're showing right now is sort of a storefront system. It may have a spandrel panel if they're like, as you're talking about mechanicals and other things, maybe
right.
up top. And so like what we are showing is that full expression of a storefront panel. It may have a spandrel panel or something else that wouldn't be glazing. That's something that we'll figure out, but we like that opportunity. It provides sort of that same structure of the storefront. And so we would figure out where we might have a spandrel, where it might just be full glazing, but there won't be any reduction in glaze in the storefront systems that we're showing.
Okay, so same thing as the rear elevation, right? Since you will still develop the sections of those units, so in certain areas it will be spandrel instead of the full height glass, and for the rear unit.
On the rear, I think that as we have it right now, I think that is fully glazed at the moment. But yeah, let me just check as well. But I don't think we have that band of brick on our elevation. And so that is that's more for the aesthetic and to break up the materiality. That's not because of the mechanical or anything else. We just think that that's a wonderful little element that adds a little bit of a premium material, varies up that rear muse as we discussed with your team. And we're really excited about that back area.
Okay. And for the fire access, the big stairs up to the second floor open space, what's the structure, what's the material, the structure of that big stairs at the back? The outdoor.
Yeah, I believe it's most likely just a steel stair. We'd have to look a little bit closer on what that would be. But I think it may have a base of a little bit of concrete, but I think it's largely a steel stair.
Okay.
And we think it's actually a nice asset and a design feature that we would like to, it sort of becomes a bridge over. That is something that we're developing.
Yeah, because on the rear elevations, what we see now is pretty open and it seems like there's no support under the stair now. So I want to know whether in the end you will still keep the openings as it is showing now, or it might be blocked because of the structure requirement.
Well, I think using materiality, like we want it to be open. We do think it's a design feature. And so that is part of the intent of having this be an element that sort of frames and creates the space of that back community room. And so we're actually excited about the way that would just play with the rear yard space.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions for now.
Thank you. Board Member Hirsch, do you have any questions?
No, none at this time.
Okay, thank you. So to my colleagues, in the interest of trying to move this along, I'd like to suggest that rather than us going through this project again in detail, I think what we need to do is, at least my opinion, is come back with conditions that we think this building needs to have in order to meet our standards. Whether or not they intend to do that or whether the city intends to enforce it is to some degree beyond our control. But I think last time made a pretty clear list of what we thought the building needed. And we're not seeing that today. We all can see that. And so I don't want to get into an argument with the applicant about it, but I'd like to have us instead recommend approval subject to a list of conditions. To that effect, I've already written up what I think is a list of conditions I'd like us to just go through and see if we can agree on, if that's okay with my colleagues. If anyone would like to say their piece about this in advance of that, that's fine, but that's how I'd like to proceed. Do I see some nodding heads?
Sounds good to me.
David, do you want to offer opinions about this before we start that process, or are you okay with that?
I'm fine with that idea.
Okay, so to that effect, I've written it up. Claire, could you pull that on the screen, please? What I've done is written down what I think are the 5 conditions remaining that I suggest we keep. And I'd like us to go through these one by one and see if we all agree. And I've even tried in here to give us what I think is the objective code standard behind our rationale for this. I really think it's good if we can unanimously put this forth to the town. This is the recommendation of the Palo Alto Architecture Review Board to produce a quality project. Whether or not it gets affected is really beyond our control at this point. So I've got a few printed copies here if anybody wants it as well. But
yeah.
So the first one regards to internal circulation. As we'd said before, we think there needs to be a trash room on each floor within 200 feet of every apartment. I think that's a clear requirement. We also ask for an internal connection to the fitness and art spaces down on the street. So I think we need to hold with that standard. And then I listed a series of code things that I think clearly require that. When I say clearly, that's what I mean by objectively. So we'll leave that to staff to interpret. Does anybody have any comments or adjustments, changes on this first item?
None.
I would just like to say that, just as a little bit of clarification potentially for the applicant on why this trash chute issue is so important, is because if you do not provide trash access within a reasonable length, people will just leave their trash outside their doors. And then you're going to have buildup of community space that is going to be really undesirable for the people living there. So this was something we had asked for before, I believe repeatedly. And while we understand that it is a big ask because the recirculation and the figuring out the internal circulation paths to accommodate these is, it's not a small task. We understand that. But the potential downside to not having these trash chutes available could be pretty dire. And it would create a really uninviting interior space for the people living there.
I have a little additional comment is I'm not looking to design the project for you, but frequently very commonly on a project of this scale with this number of tenants, the trash chute is normally in an area close to the elevator where everybody could take advantage of the fact that they use an elevator on each floor and take care of their trash issues very close to that central area. It strikes me that it is very similar to the idea of the circulation being in the center of the building, which you've now improved significantly by changing it. So, and it seems to be that there's a location within the garage, how it affects your parking, I'm really not prepared to discuss at this point, but there's a way in which the garbage could be removed from an area in the center of the building to a garbage room. And I just talk about this as a concept that it seems that you have to consider very seriously, because this is unacceptable the way it is right now. It is just so unlikely that anybody is going from the extreme distance is going to take their garbage, as noted by fellow commissioner here. So it's an absolute must that has to change.
They're very clear comments. I hope the town is listening to what we're saying. Hold on a second, Jody. Yes, Ying-Chi.
Yeah, so I think last time we suggest 3 items to be within 200 feet. One is stair, that is for life safety, and the other is trash, and the third one is laundry. So right now it's only the staircase meet the 200 feet distance. That is the minimum code requirement. That is more like the survival level. But to make the space more desirable to live with, I think it is critical to have a walking distance like within 200 feet for trash and laundry. So I think it's important. It's that although there's no code requirement for this, but it's make the building much more desirable instead of just meet the fire safety issues.
Board Member Chen, I think we should be careful. There is a code requirement for this. I've listed 3 separate items here, and I think not only is it a requirement, but it's pretty clearly objective, in my opinion.
Right.
And I think we need to be clear with the town. That's how we see this.
Okay. Yeah.
They can interpret it
Yeah,
whether
I
or
mean,
not
just
subjective, but
number wise, there's no specific number requirement, right? But it's just
that doesn't make it not a requirement.
right.
in my
Okay.
opinion. You mentioned laundry. I specifically took that off of this list because in the code, I find it specifically addresses trash, not laundry. If you'd like to add it in, we can do that if the rest of my colleagues think so. I was trying to think of a list that's really the minimum required to make this building what we think of as meeting our standards.
You know, I think that there's a compromise, if I might speak on this, on the laundry issue. There's a sort of a compromise here in that they have a central laundry related to an outdoor space. So it's not an unreasonable decision to have the laundry on the first floor. That's, you know, you can take your laundry to a remote space. It would be, I think, much more convenient if there were a laundry space on each floor. Again, sort of central to the building. But this is an alternative, which I think might still be acceptable to have it on the ground floor where it is, related to the community room and to outdoor space and to potentially an area where they could even have play space for children or whatever if they might consider.
Are we all in agreement with that? Basic, you're okay with that, Ying-Chi? Okay, I believe Jody Gerhardt had a comment she wanted to make or something to add to our discussion. Jody?
Yeah, so I think we're all well aware that this project is, under the SB 330, the measures have been frozen. They were frozen before our Chapter 1824 went into place, which is our new version of objective standards. Staff will need to discuss these code sections with the director and with the city attorney to ensure that they agree that these are objective enough to enforce. So I can't 100% promise that we will be able to enforce this recommendation.
Thank you very much, Jody. If we could move on to the second item here. This one says, provide greater variation of the El Camino Real and Acacia Street facing facades by A, using a greater variety of window sizes and alignments, and B, creating a cornice, parapet, eave, or other element to differentiate the top of the building. So again, I've listed, this time they come out of the South El Camino Real guidelines, and I think they're what I would consider to be objective, at least in the sense that there has to be something there and there's not. Any comments, feedback, adjustments, changes from the board on this item? David?
Yes, I do have one consideration. I think that we were also concerned about the massing of the front of the building, and that sort of falls under the same item. And it seemed to me that if there were more flexibility in the design, one could eliminate some of the massing by moving a unit to the back of the building. It would be possible to change that massing, but there's been no effort to do anything like this, to actually reduce the size of the front of the building, the white area there, that's raised. So, it seems unfortunate that nobody was listening to our earlier comments about how that could be done.
I think your sentiment is shared. Any other comments about this item number 2?
I was just going to say that along those same lines, the building elevation should have variation in depth. And this big left-facing white facade does not have much variation or depth. And while reorganizing internally apartments is one way to achieve this, just variation in materiality is another way. And you've successfully done that on the right half of the building, but it was never even attempted on the left, even with us bringing this up multiple times. And I think that's where the frustration is coming in, that with relatively minimal effort, there could be a more variation introduced to this left, very white facade, and we haven't seen it.
Ying-Chi, any comments from you?
No comments for this one.
Okay, so Kendra and David, do you want to suggest an additional line in this
Yes,
condition?
I would.
If
I'd
you
like
could-
to
If you
say,
could suggest, Claire, are you able to type on this so we can actually see what's being said? I gave this to you as a Word document. So it'd be item C, 2C, right, David?
yeah.
So why don't you see what you can come up with, Claire? If you could capture that, then we can see it.
So I would also suggest that A and B need to be more objective, if you can be.
We're trying hard to keep it as objective, to keep it objective. David, keep that in mind, please. We like,
But,
it has to be
Yes, more
objective in order for it to be
specific, I
enforced.
More,
guess,
yeah, more
is the
specific probably
word.
is the right terminology. As we need some numbers and locations and things of that nature.
Well, reduce the massing of the facade, El Camino facade, by introducing some recesses and by introducing recesses and potential plan changes. I really, I just to casually discuss this, it seems to me that the way the building has been designed, this is separate from the language here. Let's just talk about a little bit. The actual back of the building has a gap in it, in which could be placed units that are presently on the front of the building. I'd like to put in a recommendation that they consider relocating units so that they could create a break in the massing in the front, in particular at the top of the building. So I could use some help on the wording there.
Yeah, I'm finding it, Dave, just so, David, non-objective. I mean, it's such a subjective thing you're saying. And I'm not sure it's inherently a problem to have apartments completely along the El Camino facade. What I think we're trying to say is we want the left portion of the El Camino facade, that's the white element, to have a variation of at least 2 feet in depth to occur how many times? 4 times? Something like that. We have to be specific or else it just doesn't get, it has absolutely no bearing. As it is, we have very little chance that this will be taken seriously, but
Yes.
if we can try to give it specificity, we can get there. or else just make a blanket statement so it's out there for the record. But I don't support taking apartments off of the El Camino facade. I think it's a good idea to have them there. I just think that the windows are just too regular. That's to me the biggest single problem with the facade. Can anybody else help with this statement?
Yeah, and again, also on, I'm feeling a little bit more generous maybe by saying that I feel that an introduction of a new material, a change in materiality could be beneficial here. And really, it could be that simple. Instead of reorganizing, instead of moving apartment buildings, just take a look at the materiality that you're using and the rhythm that you've created here. It's one big white mass with highly repetitive window punctures and dotted with a few balconies, right?
So if you said, Kendra, in item A, use a greater variety of window sizes and alignments, comma,
Correct.
or use a greater variety of material selections and treatments.
Exactly.
If we gave them an option of just changing the texture, the surface of the material rather
Right.
than the windows, would that be meet your standard?
That would,
take us
to
there.
me, that would satisfy the standard here, that we're
You're nodding your head, Ying Chi?
introducing the variation to the facade.
David, are you okay with that kind of a change on line item A?
Yeah, I guess so. It's more minimal.
Claire, did you catch that, please?
Yep, she's got it
Oh, you're great.
there. She's on it.
Okay, so we're still back to question C though, David. How do we phrase that? So we can either try to get super specific and tell them what we think they have to do, or leave it more general like you have it and see what happens.
I think it's enough if it's done in textures.
So can we eliminate C altogether, do you think?
I would say yes, but that's a call for David since he introduced it.
Yeah.
You introduced it, right? The texture change?
The texture change, yes. The variation in 2 feet of depth was not me.
No.
Okay.
Okay, so
So if
it would
everyone
all
feels-
be in textures.
Yeah, so textures, materiality, something like that would be sufficient to create the variation and appearance of depth, as I will put it, on that based on the South El Camino design guidelines 4.3.8.
I mean, of course, they're going to have to carry it around the other areas that are also white on the building.
Yes, so we should, well, it says it right here, the way it's written, El Camino Rail and Acacia Street facades.
Exactly, those are the two.
Yeah.
Mhm, okay.
the large
So
white
can we
masses.
eliminate C then, David?
Yeah, we could eliminate,
So
well, so do you feel strongly that the top of the building has to have a more defined element as well?
Well, I feel strongly that the code requires it. That's what the South El Camino Rail guidelines says in 3 different places.
I have to tell you that I think it's the South Camino Real.
Don't even
guidelines
say
are-
it, David. I know what you think.
Yeah.
We're trying to hold an objective code here and enforce it. I think this particular design would be improved by that, but I believe there's other ways to do it as well. We've talked about this. Can we remove item C, David, from this list number 2?
Yeah, we can remove it, but I think it in a way that the texturing of the facade is the most important aspect of it here.
Because
We're-
the items
we're
A
using
and
that
B,
A.
item A, there's
We're
there's a
covering that.
chance. We're giving them something that's quite feasible. It's, doesn't have to cost more.
But we're going to also say window alignments and all that.
Well, we've said that in here in A. We're giving them a choice.
So with window alignments and or,
We said, we
texturing
said
of the
window
facade?
alignments or textures and colors.
that's good.
That's, you're okay with that?
Yeah, Claire, do you mind after where it says in item A, material selection, I would just put comma textures and or colors so that we're super clear. You guys comfortable with that?
Yeah.
Ying Chi? Okay, let's go on to number 3. So-
Do you want to talk about 2B a little bit? Is there any more definition we can give to that?
I would include parapet as one of those elements that can be altered based on exactly the same wording. In other words, I'd like to see
Yeah.
one item, really, one item, including cornice. So that could be part of the idea of how they develop the
So
texture
I'm
material.
not following, David. So how we changed the phrasing of that? Right now, we just listed out cornice, parapet, eave, or other element. Should we just say a cornice? I mean, that's the traditional way of doing it. When you read our South Camino Real guidelines, there's an image there of a
it's
building
fine.
with a cornice. That's what they mean.
So,
I hate to tie an architect's hands and tell them what to do, but we've asked twice.
well, no, wait a minute. We're creating a cornice, parapet, eave, or other element to differentiate the top of the building. We're suggesting actually that they consider material changes that could be on other floors, not just the cornice.
That's a separate item. The material changes are with the entire white facade.
So we're making that C.
No.
Well, where do the windows and cornice, parapet, eave, I mean, where does it all fall within the texturing of the facade of the building?
Well, line A gives them a choice of changing the window alignment and size or changing the material selection. and
We've
texture.
made changes on the screen.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, it helps.
Okay.
Comfortable with the way that reads?
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay, let's move on to number 3. I'm going to put this to the applicant. It's not just about making a beautiful building that you think is beautiful. The building has to fit into the town. Bright white buildings are very reflective. When they're next to a residential neighborhood, it's not pleasant to the neighbors. And one of the issues is not just as you required or suggested how you like it. It's how it fits. All of us here as architects like to make white buildings sometimes. That's not the issue here. It's about compatibility with the neighborhood. To that extent, I've pointed out the contextual compatibility requirements in Palo Alto, and that's what we're citing for this one. To my colleagues, the way we measure brightness really is what's called the light reflectance value. I just took a stab at a value of 70, which is still quite a white building, but I think we should just give some firm number that the color of that facade has to meet. I don't think the applicants actually picked out a color yet. I'm really surprised that this is such an issue because it's such an easy thing to do. And this is a low standard. Most towns we work in have a standard of 50.
Yeah, I was just going to speak to this a little bit. Working in neighboring cities, Woodside, Los Gatos areas, even Los Altos Hills, a lot of these neighboring cities do have light reflective value minimums for exactly this reason. It's for neighborhood compatibility, right? That when you have a bright white house, that's one thing. When you have a bright white 6-story building on El Camino where people are driving past it every single day, that's a greater impact than having 3 neighbors with white houses. So in addition to this, it's sort of you compounded your own issue here by making this facade unbroken, right? You've created this huge white facade that's basically dotted with minor windows and you want to paint it all white. So not only is it that there's a white portion of this building, it is an unbroken, massive stretch of white. So one of the reasons that we were asking for this before is because of how it impacts the people, driving down that street, commuting down that street, working on that street across from this building, and how it affects the neighbors that live in this neighborhood. We've had multiple projects come through ARB where we have made comment on the amount of white. I can think of one off the top of my head. It was on Alma. It was a much smaller project than this, much smaller. I think it was a 4-unit house. And again, even in that moment, we're sitting there looking at this going, that's going to be a huge white stretch of wall. It's going to affect the people driving up and down Alma, right? It is, as we stated before, a relatively easy adjustment to make. We're not asking for any sort of increase in financial issues. There's no hardship here. We're not asking you to make it a not white building. We're asking you to take a second look at the light reflectance value and of the proportions and size of the amount of white you want to include. So I actually just based on some of the neighboring towns, I was a little bit more generous than Peter's being here. So I had a higher number from the light reflective value that I was going to propose, because I do think that white buildings are beautiful. And as we all love Richard Meyer, so we all love a white building. And we don't want to tie you into a corner of not having white. What we're asking for is that you're more conscientious of how you're using the white, in what scale and in what brightness. And these are not big asks. So my number would be higher than this, though.
Okay, so what do you think, Kendra?
I like to have a light reflective value of up to 80. So as long as it's got a 7 in front of it, 79.9. And just so you guys are aware, some of the whites that we typically see, like a Swiss coffee, is an 81.91. So that would be too white. A white dove we use a lot is an 85 on the light reflective values. So, but the Swiss coffee is everyone knows Swiss coffee, we use it a lot. So, and that's just over the tipping point. So finding something just under that tipping point is something that we could be very amenable to, I believe. And Peter does have a deck of colors here with light reflective values. You can go on Benjamin Moore's website, Sherwin-Williams' website, any of the paint colors, and they do have the light reflective values. There are plenty of white colors that are under that 80 threshold. Now, I wanted to be super generous. We'd allow you to have the Swiss coffee as a color on its own and make that number at 82. It is a little bit bright though. And we have a project recently going up that is, seeing it in person, it is quite a bright white. And for an expanse, again, this large, you have to take into account the size and scale of it, right? The implementation of it. Having white trim is one thing. Having a huge white wall is another. So on this scale, I would say that you should be less than 80.
Okay, less than 80. Ying-Chi, do you have an opinion? Assuming you're on board with the basic idea, what's the number? What light reflectance value would you support?
Well, now we all agree with the white, but just off-white. So now.
How wide?
Yeah, so I think 80 is pretty good number. Yeah.
David, do you have a sense of familiarity enough to make a judgment on what you think?
I'd have to look at your samples.
Do you want to do that?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind.
So on the back is the LRB. I think I picked this as a 70 and an 80.
Of course, we have to, in this light.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah, right. Especially if it's under the sunshine, it will look much brighter.
Brighter. Yeah.
So I'm going to just hold up these. I know this is very difficult for anyone to see, but we've got 3 colors right there. There's an 80,
They're all the same.
a 75, and then 84. So you can see the difference.
80.4 and 80.47 and 75 point.
Right.
Oh, boy.
Those 3 over. And if you flip them over, you'll notice they're not that dramatically different. It's just how the light reflects off of them.
Don't they look yellow?
These look a little bit more off-white.
But those are considered white.
Those are considered white.
Okay, I can support 80.
My last question would be, do we want to be generous and support up to 82? So, would we like to support up to 82 so that the Swiss coffee is allowed? Because that is a very common color that is used.
I just want to have a number out there. That's a number. So
Okay.
if it's 82, then that's fine.
Let's make, I'd
What are
say
you thinking
82. I'm changing my vote to 82.
Okay, so we'd like this to read light reflectance value of 82 or less?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Can we go to the next item, please? This one says,
Peter.
provide greater privacy to the rear floor ground units by A, elevating the units 12 to 18 inches above the ground, or reconfiguring the 3-bedroom end units to avoid at-grade bedrooms with windows fronting directly onto sidewalks or public outdoor spaces, or provide a 4-foot wide landscape buffer between the buildings and adjacent sidewalk or outdoor space. So we're basically saying that the ground floor apartments, because they're at grade, have a significant privacy issue. And we're identifying 3 different ways that they could remedy that situation. I believe those are supported directly and objectively by our code. But I think it's something we should look at. So it's really the end 2 units, the 3-bedroom units that have bedrooms with windows right at the sidewalk or right at the outdoor area. at grade.
I would say just looking briefly at these plans, it does appear that the internally two facing bedrooms, have that capacity for a landscape buffer. It's on the Muse pathway. What really is concerning is two very specific bedrooms, one that is facing Olive and one that is facing the common space / Acacia. The one at the common space and Acacia could have room for a landscape buffer. The one on Olive is probably the most tricky.
May I just ask one question relating to the elevation of the units? This is a question for the applicant. Are all of these units intended to be ADA compliant? Or some of them?
Yeah, there aren't any stairs, and they would be ADA accessible.
And I think with 12-inch rise could be accommodated with a ramp over this distance. And there's no reason the building can't raise a little bit. It has a 20-foot structure. Again, these are not expensive changes we're asking for. These are common sense improvements to make the building livable that are supported objectively by our code.
Right. And for what it's worth, when we did look at the sections of this area, this common floor, this first floor area where these townhouses are supposedly has a 17-foot height between level 1 and level 2. So within that 17-foot height, I mean, you don't have to raise the entire building. You could literally raise the flooring elements within those units. Have a sleeper system, use raised trusses, something like that, that would just increase the floor within the space that's already there. If you've got 17 feet that you're working with, you can just raise that floor up by 1 foot and solve a lot of these privacy issues without changing anything else. You're staying within the shell that you've already created.
Okay, any comments on this, Yingxi?
Right, as Kendra said, raising the floor is a way to help reduce the ceiling height, but also even reduce 1 feet is still not enough, right? But privacy and ADA issues, I think 12 inches shouldn't be a problem, and it add more privacy to the.
Are you
tenants.
comfortable with these numbers, 12 to 18 inches? Should it be a greater amount, lesser amount?
Yeah, I think 12 inches is pretty good comment.
Okay. David, any thoughts on these three items, these three possible remedies?
No, I think they're all very good.
Okay.
And I would say, I would agree with 12 to 18, but if everybody wants to minimize it to 12, and then it's very clear and very reasonable.
I had thought to push it higher, but I'm just trying to keep it within range that they can easily accommodate.
Yeah, I think leaving it open-ended 12 to 18 is plenty, and then they
Right.
can make the decision as they see fit.
Yep, I would agree.
Okay, so let's go to the fifth item. This is regard.
Can I just ask one point of
Absolutely, I'm sorry, go
clarification?
ahead.
For item C, you indicate a 4-foot wide landscape buffer. I assume that that's meant to be, some sort of landscaping that actually, is up to a certain height maybe. Because there is a landscape buffer right now in terms of, actually having like ground floor landscaping between the street on Olive Avenue and the residence.
Good
So-
point. We don't necessarily want to count grass as being an appropriate landscape buffer
Right.
to increase privacy.
So is the
Well, I don't-
intent to have like a certain height maybe?
I guess so. What I'm responding to, Claire, is El Camino Real Guideline 712, where it specifically says an 8-foot sidewalk and a 4-foot setback area landscaped as a planter strip. So I'm trying to be objective. If we go beyond that, you're right, that the landscaping clearly has to be big enough to provide privacy of some kind. But just keeping people away from those windows is the critical thing.
Yeah, I think that we could add something in here that says a physical impediment between standing directly under that window. So instead of specifying the height that the landscape plant needs to be, just providing that it needs to be a physical impediment. Someone can't walk up to that window.
What do you mean by physical
Physical.
impediment?
I mean, just if you have a lavender bush, they're not going to be able to stand in the
Yeah,
bush.
I think if you say shrubs and trees
I think-
Right,
versus
as opposed
ground
to
cover.
grass, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
So
shrubs
no,
and trees,
not
that's
including ground
trees
cover.
Yeah,
Coming
let's
to
do
the
that.
rescue again. So
Thank
can we
you.
put that in there someplace, the shrubs and trees definition?
Mhm.
Okay, are we good with that?
Yep.
Ying-Chi? Okay, last item here was regarding the finish, the ribbed concrete finish on the residential portion at the back. And we've all talked about how we don't feel it's very residential. I just said to bring it back to the 35% surface area. That's the number we wound up with in our objective standards in the new code section 18.24. That is not a standard that these folks are obligated to follow, but it is nonetheless the standard we established for the town. So I think that's a fair statement to leave it at that. Does anybody have any way we can phrase this better, differently? Is this something we feel strong about? At this point, it's,
I admit that this is one of those that I'm sort of willing to let go on.
yes, Claire.
I just want to note that, this does relate back to 1824 of the code, which the project is not subject to.
I'm aware of
Yeah,
that.
he
yes.
just said.
Yeah, I just, that's the only standard we have. This is clearly in the gap between it. I think at least we've pointed out for public measure and good conscience, that's the current standard. If these folks want to build their building to our standard, it's not a big ask. It's not going to cost them less money to do less ribbed concrete. Ying-Chi, any comments, thoughts?
No, yeah, so I think, I just want to clarify, so what you're written here is just for the rear units, not including the community room, the laundry room part, right? Or the entire. rear
Yes, the
elevation.
design intention is that you should differentiate residential
Residential,
units.
yeah,
And
understand, yeah.
certainly should not make them look like a tilt-up silicon plant.
Yeah, just want to clarify.
That's the intent.
So can I wonder why we're not, since they're using wood siding, why we're not requesting the addition of more friendlier material in the back?
I just didn't know how to say it. I didn't know how to say it. When I look at our objective standards, 1824-090, we have a list of about half a dozen materials that we've deemed to be appropriate for this sort of use. And so we could reference that again, use one of those materials. But I don't think we need to say that. They will do that, I imagine. I'm pretty sure when I went back through our conversations and discussions, it was really the issue that this was very cold and industrial looking. Just seemed so inappropriate for residential, especially residential fronting a real residential neighborhood behind them.
Mhm.
So we're just asking for something less
So
than
then
that.
you really ought to be asking for some variation in the window
All
pattern
of
as
that.
well.
Yeah, we could add any of those things to this section.
Because it's a bunch of vertical strip windows.
Yeah. No, it's unfortunate that it looks more industrial than residential, and it's on the side of the building that should be transitioning to the single-family homes.
Mhm.
So
Absolutely.
I'm open to suggestions to change this, modify, add
Yeah,
to.
well, we had saying change in window pattern and material to potentially, or to include the use of more wood or natural materials that are part of the building's present use. I mean, we use, the wood is used on the front facade significantly.
Any other ideas? How do we write this down if we want to do that?
Yeah, I think adding greater variety of the window sizes will be helpful and soften the residential area
Mhm.
and material selections.
And material selection. Leave it up to them to
So
do that.
suggest some text so we can type it in there. Just continue on this next sentence would be provide greater variation in window size and configuration. Do you want to say something like that?
Mhm.
So Claire, just follow that surface area, provide greater variation with window size and configuration at the same, it has to reference back to these rear ground floor units somehow. You may want to rephrase that sentence. Is that what we're thinking about, David?
Mhm.
Do we all support that? Kendra, you're nodding your head.
And material selections.
Okay, so another sentence, provide greater variation with exterior finish material selections at the ground floor with the rear ground floor units.
Yeah, and again, this should be just for that Muse area.
Just the Muse area.
Okay, are we on board with
So-
this?
Is this last sentence the same, along the same line of thinking as the first?
It's in addition to the first. You could put reduce data, comma, and provide greater variation. It would be a better way to do that. 35% of the surface area, comma, and provide greater variation. Okay, thank you. Do we have any other items that any members of the board feel should be on this list of conditions? No, David?
Thinking, I want to go over the list that we've used in our minutes of the meeting.
Yeah, I went through that pretty carefully, David. The one thing we've ignored is the request for a traffic study regarding whether the building faces off of Acacia or Olive. I was satisfied with the gentleman's explanation of that.
Yeah, I am too.
And so I feel they've met that requirement for us. I'm waiting for David to see if he's not being rushed here.
Yeah.
There was a comment about the cord, tin, and natural wood finishes will work with the budget of the project.
There was a comment. They responded in writing that they intend to use those materials and they fit their budget. So
Okay.
it's hard to do that. So what I'd like to do then is make a motion. And then I'd like to give the applicant a chance to address our comments after we've made the motion. So I move that we recommend approval of this project subject to the conditions listed. I'll look for a second from that motion.
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. Before we have a vote, however, to the applicant, do you have any comments you'd like to make following our discussion? We've just said some things about your project, and I want to be sure that you have a chance to put in the record anything you may think about what we're asking. We very much want your project to go forward. We support what you're doing. You're a good organization. We're just trying to tweak the design a little bit. So, okay, no comments.
But I guess I would like to say one thing. Thank you for the opportunity. Just very briefly. In some ways, this commentary today was helpful in helping us understand more specifically what your concerns were. Specifically, the question of the reflectivity of the white paint that we choose. And so I would just like to say, we'll take your comments to heart and we'll take a look at how we can maybe incorporate some of these into our final design. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can we have a vote, please, staff?
Chair Balte,
Yes.
Board Member Chen,
Yes.
Board Member Hirsch,
Yes.
Vice Chair Rosenberg,
Yes.
motion carries 4-0.
Thank you very much.
No, I want to thank our chair for the way it's been presented here. I think it had to be very specific like this. And I think it's very, very important with the process that we're going through here, you know, the type of a project that it is, a 330 project, where we don't have all that much leeway with it. We can't vote something down really, but it is going to go to council, you know, and it is important that it's very, very specific like this. much better than a previous one that we took to council and didn't have enough to say.
Thank you, David. Let's take a 10-minute break. We'll return at 12 minutes after 10. Thank you. Next item is a public hearing regarding 1020 East Meadow Circle. Recommendation on applicant's request for approval of a minor board level architectural review for site improvements to an existing commercial building. Improvements include changes to the building envelope, restriping for parking stalls, accessibility, and HVAC upgrades, flood proofing, a new trash enclosure, a new raised utility yard, and new landscaping. Do we have any disclosures by board members on this item? Board Member Hirsch.
Visited the site.
Rosenberg.
I have nothing to disclose.
I disclosed that I visited the site.
I disclosed I visited the site as well.
Thank you very much. Do we have a staff report on this item, please?
Good morning, board members. My name is Garrett Stalls. I'm the project planner who's reviewing this application. As the chair had noted, this application includes a number of site modifications to the site while the existing building will continue to remain. The changes that are included are repainting the building, installing a new raised utility yard at the back of the site along West Bay Shore Road, incorporating a new trash enclosure, a new roof mechanical screen, parking stall restriping, and incorporating additional native landscaping onto the site while also satisfying the 50% shading requirement over the parking area. Some other important items to keep in mind while reviewing the application: there are 32 existing trees that are proposed for removal on site, with 30 being planted on site to accommodate those as part of the urban forestry tree technical manual replacement strategy requirements for no net loss of canopy. And in addition to that, the applicant will be required to pay an in lieu fee for offsite tree planting. One thing to note that was included as an attachment to the staff report is the noise study that the applicant had provided to identify how the introduction of the new rooftop mechanical equipment, as well as the utility yard at the back of the site, will be able to comply with the city's noise ordinance at all property lines, including near the adjacent echelon townhomes. In addition to that, the new lighting scheme that is incorporated into the plans will not exceed the 0.5 foot candle requirement at all property lines, including as it faces towards Adobe Creek and the echelon homes. One thing, what you can see on the screen is examples of the proposed design that you have in the plan sets that are submitted to you as well. It also shows the paint match color to on the top image, you have the kind of the side elevation of the building with the paint matching or paint scheme matching to the different parts of the building. You can see which is included in the plan set, as well as on the material board that is up with the board members right now. You can see on the sides of the buildings, they plan to repaint the building as this kind of gray P1 stormy sky with this blue Patriot blue trim, and incorporating at the rooftop mechanical enclosure, they're going to have a charcoal gray powder coat, and you'll see a little bit later that there's also a white there's also a white color that they're going to be painting that mechanical roof screen, so that it will blend in a little bit more with the building. Here you can see a section of the utility yard at the back, which shows the new HVAC equipment, the cooling tower, which will be used to facilitate the data center that's being proposed within this existing building. It is a fairly tall structure, but it is a part of an all-electric proposal with the design. So it is something that is newer and very different than what we've seen in a lot of other projects that are trying to go all electric. Just something that we anticipate being more common in future submittals, where we have a data center that's being proposed as a part of a research building in the research park, as well as in these ROL research office and limited manufacturing zone districts. What the applicant has included, and what you can also see as part of the material board, is a mechanical screen that incorporates not only trees in that design to try to screen the mechanical equipment from view, but it also pulls from the nearby existing baylands with the reed design kind of in the lower screen, or the lower mechanical screen that you can also see. Relative to the new trash enclosure, you can also see here that they're proposing a CMU trash enclosure to be able to store all the new trash bins that they're incorporating into the site. This is something that's actually fairly common in a lot of research park buildings that they utilize the CMU material to kind of create the base of the walls for each of the buildings, and then incorporate this new roof over the structure so that there isn't any rain or drainage that occurs kind of within those enclosures. Here you can see another image of the roof screen that's being proposed. It incorporates the solar white roof screen color with this gray powder coat finish. You can see on this image here, there's the existing site plan on the left-hand side and the proposed site plan on the right-hand side. You can see that mostly what's occurring is kind of restriping the building as well as reducing the existing roof mechanical enclosures footprint. Now, rather than having it across the entirety of the building, there'll be two smaller roof screen enclosures at the front and at the back of the site, as well as you have the proposed trash enclosure and additional utility yard at the back. And as I noted earlier in the presentation, you have here on the left-hand side the proposal that will satisfy the 50% tree canopy coverage over the entire parking area, which is something that wasn't provided before. On the right-hand side, you also see the plant schedule, which, as I mentioned before as well, incorporates a majority of native planting species within the site and some visual images of the proposed landscape. Staff's recommendation would be to approve the application based on the findings and conditions of approval noted in the staff report. And the applicant is also present and will have a presentation as well.
Thank you, Garrett. Could we have a staff applicant presentation, please? You'll have 10 minutes to speak. If you could state and spell your name for the record, we'd appreciate it.
Can you all hear me? Okay, great. Alex Avalone with Google, AlexAvellone.
Therese Hazelroth, DGA. I need to spell my name. ThereseHazelroth.
I'm Dan Markey, Markey.
Thank you. Okay, go ahead.
How do I pull up the share my?
Why don't you pause the time for a second, Veronica, while they get this together? There's got to be a better way to get their names recorded. Transcriber doesn't get any of that. That's the system connection.
Okay, I think we're ready. So I'll kick it off here. Thank you, Garrett, for providing that overview. Alex, again, with Google. I just wanted to highlight the neighborhood itself, East Meadow Circle. This is one of 11 buildings we own and operate in the circle. 6 of them from EM 86 all the way up to EM 40. We have renovated and occupied over the last couple of years. EM 76, EM 36 are currently in the last stages of permitting, as well as EM 20, which is the project we are speaking of today. A lot of these buildings are concrete tilt-up buildings that we kind of revitalize as we come in and renovate. And you'll see that what we're doing at EM 20 is pretty consistent with what we've done throughout the neighborhood. I will turn it over to Dan.
So this is our project site. You can see here that we are situated up against the substation in the rear of the property. We have a little bit of the townhomes in the front, and then the rest is moving into that more commercial area with one-on-one and the pedestrian bridge. You can note that on the back. Some of the things I just want to go through with what we're doing to the building itself. It is in a flood zone, so we are flood proofing the building. Did a full seismic upgrade on it. We've put in EV charging infrastructure. We put a whole new cool roof on the building. The cooling towers in the utility yard are really state of the art and very energy efficient and chemical free. We've reduced the roof screen dramatically. You can see the, as you guys had covered shortly before, right? It's down to just some very small roof screens on the top. We're doing a full tenant improvement on the inside. We have new glazing, new glass windows. That's kind of associated with floodproofing because we had to raise them all up. New landscaping throughout the site, extensive new landscaping at the front of the building, and new landscaping in that little pocket that you see there on the right. That's like a little courtyard sitting there. New ADA parking. You saw the paint schemes. And then there's this strange little triangle at the front of the building that has a column that drops down into the middle of the drive aisle, and we're removing that so that the drive aisle can really be a true drive aisle.
Yes.
I don't know how it ever got there. Some of the existing elevations that you see here, you can see on the top there that column that's dropping down into the drive aisle. The second slide on the right, that's the existing utility yard, and that's where our new utility yard is going. Some more elevations of the building itself. You can see that new utility yard that we're putting in here. You had saw previously the planting plan, but here it is again, right? So extensive new planting with all drought tolerant plants. The roof screens again has come down significantly in size. The picture on the right is the existing roof screen. So we'll be removing that and then cleaning up that roof and then putting the smaller roof screens in. For the rest of it, I'm gonna let Therese present here. This is more on the utility yard.
Technical design.
Go for it.
So these are the materials that you have the board, and I think planning explained the concrete is for the trash enclosure. The colors are, sorry about that. The colors are very similar to the existing colors. We kind of picked colors that just kind of brightened it up a little bit. We've got the perforated panels that I'll go into a little bit in further, and then the roll-up door and the white roof screen up above. This is a kind of a blow up of the mechanical yard and the cooling towers. We have 3 cooling towers with an enclosure all the way around, and a service yard that has a lower enclosure. So as you look at the building, when we were trying to figure out how to enclose this, one of the main functions of the space needed that it had to have 50% open. So we went with these perforated panels that give us that ability to put an image on it and to keep the functionality for the cooling towers. So you'll see that in that very large piece that's at the end of the desk. Our concept was to try to bring in the current landscape that's around there, and you'll see that in some of the photos that I'll present later, but also to, kind of evoke the city of Palo Alto with their famous tree, and also just a kind of a statement about the sustainability of Google and their commitment to that. So as stated before, the lower part is sort of like a walk along a creek, and we wanted to make that a little bit more delicate and more human scale. So that was the point of that. Those are the sections through to show you that the heights are at the minimum, at the very top of the cooling towers, and they are below the 25 feet limit. The structure will actually be a metal structure, and it will have it'll be panelized, and there will be, it's very simple. They have a bracket that supports those panels. One of the things about this system is this is a locally sourced company, and so everything here will be locally sourced. these are the views that we chose to show you from the pedestrian bridge. On the top of the pedestrian bridge, one lower in the bottom part as you come off the bridge, and then one in the parking lot. This is the parking lot view. And what we tried to do is get a layering effect. We will use perforations to do that. The perforation sizes will vary between 1/2 inch to 2.5 inches, and will create that kind of depth. So it's not just, you know, outlines of trees. There'll be a little bit of shadowing that happens on that screen as well. And then again, the lower portion with the reeds. This is looking from the pedestrian bridge, and you can see, again, there's that backdrop of all those trees. And so this is a kind of a nice balance between the softness of the existing landscape and the outlines of the trees. And finally, this is looking from the bridge going down the bridge. And again, the same concept there. That's all we have. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your presentation. Veronica, do we have any public comments on this project?
No, I have not received any speaker cards or raised hands.
Okay, thank you very much. Then do we have any questions from members of the board for the applicant or staff?
I have no questions at this time.
No questions.
I'm just wondering, the facade itself is, when it's filled in, is this a painted facade on the building of the materials that are on there? I didn't look closely enough, so maybe you could.
Yeah, the building's a concrete tilt up, I think from the 70s, and we're painting it, yes.
So it's keeping the exterior surface, filling in the windows where you are, and then repainting the whole surface? Is that?
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct, yeah.
And the only place you're using the blocks is the new garbage enclosure? Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. There was something that was described as a tilt-up panel. Is that's
Just the existing buildings.
That's all part of the
concrete tilt-up
existing.
building.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. Thank you.
Any more questions, David?
No, that's fine.
Can you clarify the metal perforated panels that screen the cooling towers? Are those painted white or are they left aluminum color?
They're left the aluminum color. They're left the aluminum color.
And so what's the purpose of the white painted sample?
We just picked up that panel yesterday at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and we were afraid we wouldn't have it. So I was going to explain that. So,
Okay, so, but
yeah.
to be clear, the panels are left aluminum, basically in
Yes,
natural
exactly. Yes.
aluminum color. Wonderful, thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, with no further questions, who wants to start off with some comments? Ying-Chi, why don't you? Okay.
Yeah, sure. I think it's quite simple and straightforward project, and I appreciate the materials you selected. And I think there's the site plan. I have no issues with that. It's pretty simple, and I do appreciate the metal panel that you choose. I think it's beautiful and it's appropriate for this environment to. And actually, my family and I always bike from the bridge to Bayland. So it's really, I think it's a nice addition to here. And next time, hopefully I can stop my kids and say, oh, look at the panels, it's beautiful. Yeah. So I will support this project.
Thank you, Ying-Chi. Board Member Hirsch, why don't you go next?
Well, you're right. The element that sticks out presently into the driveway is a sort of an obstruction, and why do it? And then the back of the building with the towers is the most exciting part of the building, of course. So it's in the back, and I'm wondering, I really only have one major concern about the way that you've done this project, and that is, wouldn't it be wonderful to enclose the top of the building with some of the perforated metal So you introduce some of it either at the front or all around the building at the parapet level. This way, some of the neighbors who are a little elevated and have rooms above it would actually be screened from some of the rooftop elements. Now, they're not bad what they are, but they're not as nice as the screening. So this is probably a significant additional cost to the project, but you might consider that you rim the building at the top and then you have a theme that continues all the way around the building. Just sort of struck me that's not an unreasonable idea for an idea that you have to make it a more complete image with a screening up above on that roof level. It seems to me it almost lines up so that it would fit the top. So I don't know about your budget, but it's Google after all, so you must have a certain amount of money for this idea. So I really don't have any other suggestion. You know, it seems like it's beautifully done. The landscaping obviously is very successful and softens everything and covers the parking lot area with proper shadows, et cetera. I was sort of concerned about how do you deal with the drainage on the site like this? So I don't know who could answer that question. But obviously it's all hard surfaces, mostly hard surfaces, I would say. It's really a question, what's the part of, how's that dealt with?
Yeah, so the Public Works Engineering team will, certainly be a part of the building permit review on this. And to my understanding, what they typically don't allow is for drainage to occur offsite. So drainage would need to occur in a manner that would basically kind of flow it, to my understanding, towards the street.
Towards the street.
Right, or towards other sort of catch basins if they have them incorporated as part of this.
Catch basins on the site. Okay. I agree. The ramp the bicycle ramp kind of makes me think about this idea of the rooftop even more, because you get up to that level and you're really looking at a lot of roof of the building, and then the drama of the cooling tower and the texture of the cooling tower gets to be a little less impressive as to relative to the shape of the entire building. So it's really kind of an aesthetic comment I'm making only, not a functional one. Obviously, you have to deal with functional issues as well. Parking is well done, improvement. The other aspect of this is the courtyard. That's an outdoor public space for everybody's use. Is that correct? Is there any public use at all to this outdoor public use to this?
You're talking about the courtyard on the front right-hand side?
Yeah.
My understanding is that would just be for the employees. It wouldn't be.
Employees, yeah. Right. But it's an outdoor space for the employees.
Yes, that's my understanding.
Okay. It isn't too well detailed as to what goes on there. So I was wondering how that wasn't as specifically mentioned either in the. I would think that having certain amount of outdoor space would be nice for a building like this. And since you have an opportunity for an outdoor courtyard there, that's your intention, that it would be used that way. Perhaps, you could suggest more functions that could happen out there, actually. I don't know, cooking lunches or whatever, or tables for people to eat outside. It seems to me to be a reasonable idea for that area functionally. Those are really my thoughts.
Thank you, David. Kendra.
Yeah, I wanted to thank you guys for your pretty clear, straightforward, relatively simple proposal here. I appreciate the thoughtfulness of the noise concerns and the lighting concerns, especially given the neighbors. I also would like to commend you on your design choice for the screening of the mechanical yard. Those are very often forgotten, sort of neglected. We'll just throw up whatever's cheap and easy spaces. And you guys are really turning this into something that's quite lovely to look at.
My only real comment is that it's sort of echoing David's comments here. It's kind of a shame that that's the only space that these perf panels are used. But again, I would hate to penalize you and require more of them simply because you made something that doesn't need to be beautiful, quite beautiful. You know, it'd be nice if there's like one bonus panel on the front of the building, right? Just because it is quite an attractive feature. But other than that, it's simple, it's straightforward. I think it's well thought out. And appreciate your time and efforts on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Kendra. Yes, I share my colleagues' sentiments and I have nothing new to add. Why don't we all turn to page A 2.03. What I'm seeing there is two large mechanical screens facing the street. Kendra and David, are these the screens you're thinking could also be made with a perf panel instead? Would that address the issue you brought up?
I mean, I would like the front door to be made of perf panel. I'm just kidding to some extent. No, it's for me, I actually have zero issue with what's going on above on top of the roof structure. I have no problem with what's been proposed. My only comment is that I like the tree panel and would love to see just sort of an extra one, maybe in one of those concrete blank panels. Maybe there's just an addition of a panel, just something pretty. And again, not a requirement, just sort of a thought because they are quite attractive, but I have no issue with the tall panels on top of the roof as they are proposed. Zero issue there.
David, what's your thought on that? You had mentioned this originally as up on the roof. I'm just looking for a consensus here.
Well, I would like to see the whole building rimmed in.
Okay, guys, come on. We're just looking for consensus.
I'm pushing hard.
Let's not do that.
I think it would make a terrific thing. I mean, it's your choice. You've made the choice, and it really would be quite something if it all became one thing, you know, one expression. Some ties it all together. And it's a little excessive maybe for a building like this, I'll agree. But after all, it's your best idea for the project here. So it sort of isn't doing exactly the same thing, but it's an easy transition to explain itself in a way as an element that you've used to dramatize the one side of the building. Wouldn't it work? As Kendra mentioned, even if it were part of the front door or whatever, you know, if you continued that. So
Okay,
what do
let's
you have
hear
to
what
say?
Ying Chi thinks about this.
Well, for the rooftop screen, I think probably it's not necessary because it's far away from the street and people on the sidewalk, it's hard for them to see. And for the residential area, for the buildings who live nearby, I think the height of it is just blocked with the trees, so I don't have a problem with the screen here. And also, as I think it would be nice, as David said, if we have some other places to use the same element will make the building more excited. But I was thinking about when they're just showing a map that all the buildings, office buildings nearby are all owned by Google. So I think the wall elevations, the wall materials, the solidness of the walls are just matching all the other buildings. So is it necessary to just make this data center special? I'm not sure.
Okay.
If it might be helpful too, A 0.03 also kind of shows in context where those are going to be, and they're pretty small and disparate locations on the building. Whereas I think maybe if the existing mechanical screen that stretched across the entirety of it were to remain there, that might make more sense in terms of bringing that more forward. I think as some of the ARB members are mentioning, whereas these two smaller parts, I think as board member Chen is mentioning, might be harder to see from the street context. It might not be as impactful.
Yes, why don't you
So we had some
briefly tell us
thoughts.
what you think about this?
We had some thoughts on it too. You know, the roof screen itself it's very difficult to see it from the street. You don't see it at all actually as from the East Meadow side. You certainly do see it from the bike path. You don't see it from the highway, right? The bike path itself actually screens the whole building from Highway 101, but the bike path you can certainly see it from. What we were thinking is we do have an area in the front that's sort of recessed, and we have the glass across there, and there is some railing there. We certainly could change that railing out to be this panelized system to get it to match a little bit better. And it actually goes, we have a building next door that they're doing that they are using a panelized frame in the front too. So, you know, meet the context of the neighborhood as well. So
Okay.
we would suggest, yeah, that maybe we change the
Yeah.
railing in the front.
Yes, I was sort of thinking that that's also a reasonable idea to do something like that.
Thank you. Yeah. So let's get a motion from somebody to approve this. And if you want to make this change, let's put it into motion. Kendra, your light's on.
Yeah, should it be a condition of approval?
I think we could improve
You
it.
guys, you two are thinking about this.
I
You
know.
tell us.
And again, I want to be very clear. I do not want to penalize you guys for having a good design and requiring you to do more of it. However, I'm going to make a motion to approve the project as submitted. I don't want to make it a condition. With the hope that the railing gets changed out to be more of a perforated panel to match.
That's not good enough, Kendra. You
Not
have
good enough.
to say what it is. Come on, staff can't just interpret hopes.
Hopes and dreams, hopes and dreams. All right.
Look, the gentleman offered, take it up.
Okay. If that's all right, we'll take you up on your offer and we'll say we are going to make a motion to approve the project as presented with the condition of approval that the front railings be some type of perforation panel to complement the tree / planting perforated panels on the rear yard.
It's been moved
I'll second.
and seconded. Any other comments on this? The applicant, you're okay with this? Okay, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Chair Balte,
Yes.
Board Member Chen,
Yes.
Chair, Board Member Hirsch,
Yes,
Vice Chair Rosenberg,
Yes.
motion carries 4-0.
Thank you very much. Congratulations. Okay, let's move on to our next item, which is a review of the Architecture Review Board meeting minutes for April 6th, 2003. Do we have any comments or emotion on this, please?
I move to approve the minutes as written. As drafted.
Not there.
Okay, we're waiting for a second from you.
I'll second that.
Moved and
I was not
moved and
there.
seconded. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Chair Balte,
Yes.
Board Member Chen,
Abstain.
Board Member Hirsch,
Yes,
Vice Chair Rosenberg,
Yes.
motion carries 3-0-1.
Very good. We're ready to wrap it up. I'd like to, before we do that, extend a note of appreciation to former Chair Dave Hirsch. We really value your wise leadership and impassioned advocacy for the built environment in Palo Alto. Thank you.
listen, there is a board member questions, comments, and announcements that follows here. I had an earlier discussion with Claire regarding what to do with the townhomes, et cetera, those and the meeting and the objective regulations. And just to sort of state what was described to me is that we're going to wait for the council meeting in June. Is that correct? Then
The council needs to approve the work plan for staff to be able to spend time working on that project. I think at that point, we'll have to have further discussion with the director on what time can be allocated, how much time can be allocated toward that effort. But I definitely foresee that effort moving forward.
to just where we left off the last meeting was that there were comments made to the townhomes portion of the objective standards. So what's your general opinion here? Do we wait until the council meets and decides what to do, or should we respond to the,
I mean, I think it sounds like we have
Comments.
to.
I'm sorry?
Isn't it that we need to because staff can't work on it until they.
Staff can't work on it, but we were directed to consider several modifications to what we presented.
Yeah,
So,
my understanding is that we had asked our subcommittee at the last meeting to come back to us with a revised final recommendation
mhm,
that we can complete and have it ready for staff and council if and when they're ready to review it. I
okay,
don't see any change to that, David. So we're
Okay.
still expecting our subcommittee to polish up all the work you did because it was
Okay.
quite an impressive amount of work. We had one more round of comments, which we finished.
Yeah.
We're just waiting for a final write-up on that.
okay, so that's what we will do then.
Yeah, and we'll be clear to staff. We're not asking for your time on this. We don't want to overextend, but we do want to just wrap up this project and have it ready.
Okay. But also I would like to say that, prior to townhomes, Ying-See and I've worked quite substantially on the objective standards as well, the general objective standards that have been already approved by us, approved by the previous board, actually,
I believe that's in our work plan and that we'll wait for council to respond to.
Uh-huh. Okay, and then SB 9, any comments on SB 9, how to deal with that?
That's coming up next hearing, I believe Claire
That
said.
it's included as part of the package as well, our work plan?
It's part of the objective standards that are things that we could work on in the work plan. But what I think Amy French, Chief Planning Official, outlined in the last go around was that it was going to be continued to a date certain of May 18th. And so we'll finish out the study session discussion. There's an expectation staff is going to be reaching out to other stakeholders as well to get their input. And then they would prepare recommended changes that will go through the legislative process of Planning Commission and Council for approval.
Well, it sort of opens it up a little bit to us to consider whether or not if we are going to look at those particular standards and have some general outline or comments on them that could be a part of what is discussed with others, since it's going to be out there in public. Would we want to have our imprimatur on some of that?
You're referring to more than just the SB 9 objective standards?
I'm talking specifically about the SB 9.
Yeah, I think we got through a half or a third of it last hearing in detail, didn't we? And we're set to just continue and complete, hopefully, that discussion, right, Claire? So is that
Yes,
what
I'm
you're,
expecting that to be the last study session.
and you're thinking it's not the last one even?
No, I am anticipating that would be the
That's good
last
to hear.
study session.
Yeah, so I think, David, we're pretty deep into
So
SB 9 standards.
just how much of whatever has been, I don't want to extend our discussions too long here, but just how much of the comments that we made at this are going to be incorporated in what is distributed to outside people as we didn't have an opinion about the whole project the way it was presented to us, but we had comments to make. And that was the extent of it. Do we need to take that any further?
Well, I think we would be wise as a board to be sure that when we complete our discussion of this, we've left staff in the town with a very clear record of what we think. And I think we're sort of halfway through that right now.
Halfway through. Okay. So
If I may, I think at the last hearing you had asked us about this, and I think that we concluded that staff can certainly give brief summary of what the overarching comments were from the Architecture Review Board during, any focus sessions we have with stakeholders. Although there are quite a number of comments, but we'll try and kind of do some sort of summary just so they're aware of your comments.
okay, yes, I think you've already summarized it sort of at the end of in one of the books we have. Yeah, that has been summarized, but it's pretty much of a summary. Yeah, it isn't detailed in any way. So I'm not sure that it's entirely useful to distribute it the way it is without more specific information. But I'm just making this kind of comment now because I think it's an ongoing issue that either we are or we're not involved in it. And furthermore, or whether we should discuss it in more detail, just like we would like to discuss the general objective standards, just like we've presented the townhomes. It could be presented in more detail. So do we want to bring it up again before it goes?
Look, I think we've gone enough on this today, David. Let's make a point to all of us to be well prepared for the meeting next week so we can actually get through this.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
Okay, with that, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.